At number 10, we have Daniel Kim and Grace Park, who acted in the rebooted CBS action crime drama series Hawaii Five-0 from the start of 2010. For 7 long years, the duo played their characters Chin Ho Kelly and Konu Kolokoa until they were forced off the show in 2017 because of a contract dispute. Reportedly, Daniel and Grace were both looking to receive equal pay that their co-stars Alex O'Loughlin and Scott Conn were obtaining. It was stated that CBS would not waver their final decision and set a disclosed amount of 10 to 15% lower pay grade than their castmates. Eventually, CBS went on to write Daniel and Grace out of their show in the 8th season, and in it their removal was addressed in true drama show fashion during the premiere. Funnily enough though, it's said that the drama off-screen was even juicier. Despite the network issuing glowing statements in regards to their departed stars, Grace was all but thrilled when Peter Lenkov, her former showrunner, released a tweet with indications that Grace had left the series to focus on family. Grace detailed the occurrence by explaining how the situation felt very charged to her, as well as that she did not feel it was right of Peter to make a statement on her behalf, regardless of whether or not he had good intentions. She finalized by informing Deadline that she cared about Peter as an individual, but that she did not leave the show because of what he implied. At number 9, we have Valerie Harper's self-titled sitcom where she starred alongside Jason Bateman with high spirits due to the fact that the show's ratings were increasing. Valerie was said to be headed in a promisingly strong direction for its 3rd season, and Harper decided this was as good as any time to inquire about a raise. In accordance with People, by Valerie's 3rd year, she was contracted to receive $56,750 per episode, with an additional 10% of the show's adjusted gross profits. Rather, Valerie requested there be a new contract drawn of $100,000 and 35% of added profits instead. When the studio refused to play into Valerie's demands, she pulled out an old ruse that once worked for her 12 years prior as the star of Rhoda. For this one, her request for a raise was denied. She denied showing up for work until she got what she wanted. However, her holdout tactic was not successful the following time, as Valerie's production team agreed to terms of a new contract worth $65,000 per episode with 12.5% of profits. This is what sparked Valerie's return to set, but she was let go after filming a single episode. As a result, the Valerie writers killed off her character and rebranded the show as Valerie's Family for the 3rd season. The following season, the show got a new name once more called The Hogan Family, and while the sitcom maintained its popularity without its original star, Valerie's karma came in full circle when she successfully sued production on the grounds of wrongful dismissal. At number 8, we have the crazy saga of Marcus Chung and The Matrix. His story comes after the success of The Matrix when the film creators had pitched for a double sequel. The writing/director team of the Wachowskis initially wanted to reprise Marcus with a reported offer of $250,000, but Marcus was seeking a whopping $1 million, a seemingly bizarre negotiation tactic which presumably later backfired and got him removed from the franchise. He was killed off between the first and final movies. Allegedly, after asking for $1 million, Marcus's lawyer delivered an ultimatum to the Wachowskis in a letter. In it, a matching sum of $500,000 with added bonuses and promises to receive press premiere guarantees was offered, or oppositely, Marcus would do the movies for free. Following the latter, Marcus apparently publicly added that he was being threatened and spoke on the behalf of Andy Wachowski on a call, which brought about more drama and confusion. At one point, he was reportedly taken into custody for making threats and later unsuccessfully sued the production company and distributors of The Matrix.
At number 7, Isaiah Washington. If you know Isaiah Washington, then you're probably a fan of Grey's Anatomy. The actor is a fan favorite, but after a scandal shook his career, he was fired from Hollywood for a short time. Isaiah left his role on Grey's for a number of reasons. Firstly, there was some on-set drama that blew up because he allegedly didn't get along with co-star Patrick Dempsey, and it was also alleged that they even got into a physical altercation. The scandal that really did him in, though, was his controversial use of a gay slur. He used this offensive language when referring to one of his other co-stars, T.R. Knight. As a result of his actions, he was fired from the show, and this behavior apparently led to him being blacklisted from Hollywood for a few years. He truly had been fired from Hollywood. No one wanted to work with him because his homophobic scandal was still fresh in many people's minds. People weren't really quick to forget these sort of things. Eventually, he was able to make amends and found his way back to the screen in Grey's as he took up his character's story once again. His Hollywood ban was short-lived, but it did do a number on his career regardless.
At number 6, we have former Family Matter actress Jamie Foxworth. Now, there's no hard confirmation from the cast nor crew as to why Jamie was ever dismissed, but there have been so many rumors stringed from her role's strange removal on the show, where her then character Judy exits a scene up the stairs in season 4 and never comes back down. According to FM's co-creator William Bickley, Jamie's exit came about because of budget considerations, but many allege that her mother was behind the actress's dismissal. A mysteriously reported BET article hinted that the responsibility should be placed on her mother and then manager Gwen Fox, in light of Jamie's contract not being renewed for demanding more money. The position Gwen held makes the story plausible, but regardless, Jamie's career never fully recovered from the early setback. Still, Jamie has kept a pretty lighthearted and humorous attitude about the entire ordeal.
Halfway at number 5, Sean Connery. Sean Connery is known by many as the best James Bond, and fans were devastated when he was quickly replaced. He first played the role of 007 in 1962, then he played in 4 more movies before he decided to ask for more money from the franchise. By the time Connery starred in 1967's You Only Live Twice, for which he was paid $750,000 plus a 25% share of merchandising, he was apparently just kinda bored with the role and took a risky move by asking for more money. He demanded $1 million, but the franchise declined. As a result, George Lazenby was given the role, to the dismay of fans. After that film was hit with terrible reviews, Connery was asked back and he made $1.25 million for 1971's Diamonds Are Forever.
At number 4, we have crime scene investigation actors Georgia Fox and George Eads. The 2 stars of CSI faced intense behind-the-scenes drama while filming the show because they were both eventually removed after allegedly refusing to show up for filming. In accordance with People, both actors were dissatisfied with the results of their proposed raises of approximately $20,000 per episode. When the actors attempted to hold out for more, they got snipped out the equation. CBS's co-president Leslie Moonves made a point to state that a contract is a contract, and that the company was maintaining the future of the network television business. Although there is a happier ending for this one, as both Georgia and George were invited to take their jobs back, but their rehire came with some new ground rules. The raises initially offered were revoked, resulting in the actors' negotiation tactics costing them an approximate $1.76 million. Big yikes. Even worse, George once claimed he wasn't even being petty and that he merely overslept when he didn't show up to work, rather than the hinted monetary gain story that was originally created.
At number 3, Shia LaBeouf. Late last year, Shia LaBeouf faced criticisms after his ex-girlfriend FKA Twigs exposed the actor for having hurt her while they were together. The singer issued a lawsuit against him, citing him as her abuser, where she accused him of verbally and physically assaulting her while they were together. Twigs recounted the many instances of violence against her as well as others, and this painted a pretty damaging picture for the former Disney star. This isn't the first time Shia has been exposed for his behavior, as in the past Shia has also made headlines for getting into conflict, as people have called him erratic and aggressive. This scandal came about after he made headlines for being fired from a movie set as well. Though people thought he was making a real comeback to film after being cast in the movie Don't Worry Darling, he was ultimately fired and recast because people on set clashed with the actor, with some saying that he was very aggressive. When Twigs came out with her allegations against him and her recounts of other violent instances like harming animals to get into character, people started to think that maybe he doesn't belong in Hollywood anymore. He's been pretty quiet since this scandal happened, and since he's been fired from one job already, it might make things difficult to find another later on.
At number 2, we have Walking Dead Maggie's actress Lauren Cohan. Lauren's character was surely a staple in the WD franchise for nearly a decade, but in 2018 AMC had to complicatedly decide to give in to the actress' then contract demands or remove her from her role. In her Entertainment Weekly interview, Lauren admitted that she was taken aback by her negotiation, which indicated that maybe it was time to leave. She recalls being baffled and feeling like it was just not a fit anymore, due to her and AMC not lining up in so many ways. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Lauren was already actively seeking new jobs around this time and was receiving multiple. As a result, she was no longer a part of the Walking Dead series, but the final decision to let her go was unusually a huge departure from that of the comic book series on which the show bases itself, though not entirely unlikely. However, Lauren could potentially see the return of her character Maggie in the future despite her character being offed, as her ending was technically left up in the air. At number 1, we have Iron Man actor Terrence Howard, whose leave is somewhat of a sticky situation. It's difficult to say for certain if he was fired or pushed out, but no doubt his demise in the Iron Man franchise had the same end result. While Terrence starred in the first Iron Man film and was reportedly making more than leading actor Robert Downey Jr., he was excluded from the second, and apparently there are several reasons. The main one stemmed from an alleged battle over pay. Despite him being the big bill topper in the first film, Robert Downey soon copped the title of the world's highest paid actors for Forbes for 3 consecutive years, and moved into Terrence's money spot by the time of the second film. Terrence's top spot of $3.5 million in pay supposedly stemmed from the combination of risk associated with the Robert Downey bets at the time, as well as his Oscar nomination for Hustle and Flow. In Terrence's explanation, the reason behind Robert's earning so much in the subsequent Iron Man films is alleged because the studio was borrowing from Terrence to pay Robert, and he further claimed that he was set to accumulate $8 million for the second movie. Instead, Marvel Studios supposedly reworked their offered contract and reduced it to $1 million, with plans of using the remaining dough to pay Robert. Finally, once Terrence pushed back, Marvel rumoredly closed their deal entirely and hired Don Cheadle in place of Terrence.
At number 10, Mark Webber. Actor Mark Webber, known for his part in the film Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, took to social media back in 2019, and he had some harsh words for TV network ABC after he was fired from their show Stumptown. At the time, Stumptown had just been picked up by the network and the production was getting underway, with Mark being cast in a lead role as the best friend and love interest opposite Colby Smolder's character Dax, whom the show is centered around. Soon after production started, Mark was reportedly fired from the show, and the actor said that the studio had let him go because he wasn't, quote, handsome enough for the executives. In response to his unemployment, he took to Twitter to blast the network, calling their choice degrading, and in one of his many tweets slamming ABC, he said, quote, "Look, I'm a straight white male, so I know my journey has been way less painful in this warped industry, but I'm being recast in a television show because I'm not handsome enough for the executives. It's important for me to share the real pain we endure in this industry," end quote. He also spoke out about how the industry cares so much about the appearances of their stars, saying how things really need to be changed. At number 9, Robert Downey Jr. We all know that Robert Downey Jr. is one of the most successful actors in Hollywood, coming from his rise to fame after hitting rock bottom in the past. After rebuilding his career, he really could have had any role he wanted because he's such a big name in the industry, but it seems as though even the most successful actors can still get fired. Robert was actually fired from the set of the movie Gravity after a last-minute decision was made to recast him. We know that the 2013 film Gravity stars George Clooney as the leading male, but that role was first given to RDJ. After a few days of filming, the director decided that Robert was not suited to play this role. When speaking out about the recast, the film's director said, quote, "Robert is incredibly talented, but the technological aspect of the movie presented a big obstacle to his style of acting," end quote. Clooney soon replaced Robert and the film went on to be a huge success, but I wonder how different things would have been without the recast.
At number 10, Piers Morgan. I know that we as humans are bound to mess up sometimes, but there's no excuse for being overly critical and mean to another person, because clearly it can have its consequences, like how Piers Morgan lost his job due to the rude comments that he made on TV. Piers had a lot to say after Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's interview with Oprah. Like many others, Piers was surprised at what was said during the interview, but he took some of the information shared in the interview and used it as hateful fuel that inevitably came back to bite him. During the interview, Meghan Markle opened up about her mental health and how it was affected being part of the royal family, saying that there was once a point after marrying into the family that she wanted to take her own life. Piers spoke about this on air of Good Morning Britain, and he said that he, quote, "didn't believe a word that she said." After Piers made those and a handful of other harsh comments, he started to face massive backlash from all sides, as people said that his comments on Meghan's mental health were diminishing and disrespectful. The studio he worked for, as well as Piers himself, started receiving harsh comments, and so Piers actually left his position at Good Morning Britain. He was, in a way, fired from his job, but he decided to pull the plug himself, I guess, to make him seem like the bigger person. He has since refused to apologize, and since nobody wants to work with him after all this drama, it could be that his career is finished now. At number 9, Megyn Kelly. Journalist Megyn Kelly once had her own show called Megyn Kelly Today, but after facing a scandal, her show was cancelled by the network, effectively firing her from her job. This scandal all started when Megyn defended wearing blackface at Halloween on her morning show, where she said, quote, "When I was a kid, that was okay, just as long as you were dressing as a character." Even though she tried to apologize for her remarks, the network just didn't want to take any more risks with Megyn over fears that this would reflect badly on the company, so Megyn was fired and her show was cancelled.
And at number 10, Lily Singh. When it was announced that YouTuber Lily Singh got her own late night show with NBC, the internet was set ablaze because this was a massive step for YouTubers and influencers breaking into mainstream media. But after the show aired, it was clear it was too big of a step for Lily and that she was not a natural when it came to hosting a show. After struggling through the first season, the show was picked up again for a second, but after the second season was proved to be no more interesting than the first, it was cancelled by the network. When the series premiered in 2019, Singh became the first woman in more than 30 years and the first LGBTQ person to ever host a late-night program on a major network. Lily announced the cancellation in a statement where she thanked NBC and her fans and said it's only the beginning for her career in TV. She's apparently made a production deal with UTA as well as a comedy project with Netflix. And at number 9, Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly was one of the people who put Fox News on the map and helped it to become the top of the ratings chart. But he was fired after multiple allegations of misconduct against women at the studio came to light. At first, the network stood by their star, but then 80 companies decided to boycott putting ads on the network, which forced their hand. At the time, Fox News was going through a massive transformation, losing another one of its biggest stars, Megyn Kelly, after she stood by fellow host Gretchen Carlson for coming out against her at the network. O'Reilly never admitted to any wrongdoings, and following his firing, he told Today, quote, "If you look at the totality, this was a hit job, a political and financial hit job," blaming left-wing organizations for his demise.
At number 8, Ryan Gosling. Ryan Gosling is one of Hollywood's most famous actors, but he is also someone who's experienced getting fired, and it happened very early on in his career. Back in the 90s, Ryan was part of the Mickey Mouse Club alongside stars like Justin Timberlake, Christina Aguilera, and Britney Spears, but after some drama on set, Ryan got fired from Disney. Ryan didn't stick around too long on the show, and in an interview in 2008, Ryan opened up about his 2 years on the Disney Channel, where he revealed that things didn't work out well between him and the studio. The actor revealed that the producers from the Disney Channel show thought that Ryan had a bit of an attitude problem and was seen as a bad influence on the other kids. The actor also went on to say that he was apparently considered to be such a menace to the other kids that the mothers of his co-stars went to execs to complain about his behavior. The studio eventually decided that Ryan wasn't Disney material because of his behavior, and he was soon let go. At number 7, Adrienne Bailon. Speaking of another former Disney star, the Cheetah Girls actress Adrienne Bailon is another celebrity who's been fired from the studio. The Cheetah Girls films were another set of hit films from the Disney Channel, and obviously because of the film's huge success and the fan base that it created, the film stars had to conform to the harsh standards that other Disney stars had to. After making 3 films with Disney, Adrienne Bailon decided that she didn't want to stay in her Disney bubble forever and was looking to branch out from Disney and step into roles that were more suited for her age. Being in her 20s at the time, she wanted to step away from these films, and so to do that, she came up with a plan to end her contract. Adrienne allegedly ended up leaking her own private photos, causing a stir online and in the media. This bad press was obviously not good for Disney, and so they were forced to let her go. It did hurt her career a little bit, but she achieved the outcome that she was looking for, and she got to end her contract with Disney. At number 6, Kuma the Dog. Now, you're probably going to think that this one is a bit of a stretch because he's not a celebrity in the traditional sense, but he helped sell a lot for Disney and he got fired in the end, so I figured I needed to tell his story. I'm not sure how many of you would be familiar with the show Dog with a Blog, but for those who may be unfamiliar, the title says it all. It's a Disney Channel show about a family dog who wrote a blog. To get the show up and running, the studio needed to cast a dog to do stunts and tricks for the camera, but apparently there came a scandal between the dog who was originally cast and the dog who actually starred in the show. When the role was first cast, the part went to a performing dog named Kuma. Kuma was in all of the promotional material, the photos, and the first 5 episodes of the show. He was the best fit for the role because of his experience, but all of a sudden his owner got a notice saying that they were fired, and it was for an insane reason. Before this, Kuma's owner had been raising concerns over her dog's well-being on set, saying that Kuma had been overworked, having to be on for 12 to 14 hours a day. The stress of working affected Kuma so much that he developed health issues, and on top of that, the owner claimed that they were being underpaid for their work. This all ended when Kuma was fired and replaced by another, less experienced dog, so that they didn't have to adjust the rules and place any new guidelines in place for the animal's safety. At number 5, Bella Thorne. Bella Thorne rose to fame through her time on the Disney Channel and starring in the show Shake It Up, but like many other former Disney stars, Bella began to crack under pressure of conforming herself to Disney's standards, and it resulted in her almost getting fired. Almost. She was given so many warnings that she really feared for her job at one point, so things were really serious. Because Disney stars like Bella are asked to conform to a specific brand image, whenever Bella would dress in something that the company considered too revealing, like a crop top or a bikini, some executives got really upset and they reprimanded her. All Bella wanted to do was be herself, but instead she had to wear company-approved clothing and even speak in a higher register to sound more innocent. Dumb. Bella kept on pushing until they were fed up with her, and they were so close to firing her. Bella finally pulled the plug on her Disney contract and left the company to be more herself, but her career was in serious jeopardy for a while there. At number 4, Megan Fox. Megan Fox had been in a few pretty successful films before being cast in the Transformers films, but after the success of this franchise, she was launched into fame. At least that's until things came crashing down after getting fired from her role and facing a lot of backlash because of it. When she was fired from Transformers, Michael Bay said that the decision came after she was, quote, a nightmare to work with. What really happened is that Megan made a comment about Michael Bay's behavior on set, commenting on how strict he was and comparing him to a really bad guy whose name cannot be said online, but I'm pretty sure you catch my drift. On top of everything, when fellow director Steven Spielberg caught wind of these comments, he advised Bay to fire her, and that is exactly what happened. Megan lost her job and gained a reputation of being hard to work with, which followed her for many years. She was cast in a pretty negative light for a long time, but she's happy living her truth, not caring about what Hollywood has to say about her. At number 3, Natalie Portman. Are you familiar with the 1996 film Romeo and Juliet? If you are, then you would recall that the film stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes, but it turns out that Claire wasn't the first pick for the role and someone had to be fired in order for her to get the part. Originally, Natalie Portman was cast to play the role of Juliet. At the time, Natalie was 13 years old, and though that is canonically how old Juliet was in the original Shakespeare play, the film's executives thought it would be a little too weird if the 13-year-old Natalie starred in the film alongside a 21-year-old Leo. Natalie spoke out about getting fired from the film years later in an interview where she said, quote, "It was really disappointing, but I wouldn't have wanted to be in a movie and have it look wrong." End quote. The decision was made in the film's best interest, and Natalie is okay with being fired back then, but it still must have been devastating to get booted from the production, especially as someone just starting out in the industry. At number 2, Eric Stoltz. Sometimes when people cast a role in a Hollywood production, they can later decide that whoever has been hired isn't really the best fit. This is what happened during the production of Back to the Future, as a sudden casting change left someone getting fired. The role of Marty McFly in the film originally went to actor Eric Stoltz, and they had filmed a substantial amount of footage with Eric as the leading man, but later the filmmakers reviewed the footage and decided that he just wasn't fit for the role. The executives thought that Eric's portrayal of the character was a little too serious, and they really wanted Marty to be a little more laid back and goofy, so they needed someone to fit that style. They ended up firing Eric and brought in Michael J. Fox to fill the role, reshooting many of the scenes that Eric had previously done. Though the final cut of the film is mostly Michael's work, it is believed that a few of Eric's scenes made it in, so that's a little fun Easter egg to look for next time you watch Back to the Future. And finally, at number 1, Christian Bale. The 2000 movie American Psycho stars actor Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman, and I'm sure we can all agree that he absolutely crushed this role, but there was once a chance that he wouldn't have even been able to play the part. You see, when the movie was first being cast, the producer's first choice for the role of Patrick Bateman was actually Leonardo DiCaprio, and even though they had already given the part to Christian Bale, they ended up firing the actor in order to go with Leo instead. Christian was then out of a job, but not for long, because Leo ended up having to drop out of the production because he was warned that this film would have had a negative impact on his career because of the harsh content. That was good news for Bale, as he was rehired for the role, and it was like nothing had even happened in the first place.
In at number 9, Kirstie Alley. 1982 Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan opened with a young Kirstie Alley playing the character Saavik. We eventually learned that Alley is a trained trainee and it was all a simulation, but those moments with Ali on screen made a deep impact on the whole movie. The character of Saavik appears twice more in the franchise, but not played by Ali. When asked why she was booted from the sequels, Ali told StarTrek.com in 2016 that it was because of money. Apparently she didn't ask for more money, instead the franchise offered her less money for a sequel, which is like basically unheard of. She said, quote, "That never made sense to me, like you're not paying me as much for the first one and it's a bigger role." She claimed she tried to inquire about the lowball, but instead of answers, she was just cut.
At number 7, we have Muppet star Steve Whitmire. Despite there being several reported reasonings for the Kermit the Frog voice actor and puppeteer's acts from Disney, the big deal breaker was supposedly money. Apparently one of the reasons given for Steve's dismissal was his refusal to work on a specific project because of an alleged contract dispute. However, Steve told The Hollywood Reporter that he was a casualty of a classified contract dispute between AFTRA and Disney Labor Relations. According to THR, Disney and the Muppets studio, though, Steve's negotiation tactics pushed back production for many years, even going as far back as the Sesame Street days of voicing Ernie and Kermit. A source informed Gizmodo that he was let go for demanding too much money and not for focusing on the Muppets after Sesame Street.
In at number 6, Marcus Chong. Marcus Chong, who played Tank in The Matrix, was one of the only members of the cast to survive. However, he didn't show up in the sequels, causing suspicion. The franchise wanted Chong to be a part, however he claims he was offered too little. In Chong's own 45-minute YouTube documentary called The Marcus Chong Story, he says he was offered $250,000 to appear in 2003's The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, but he wanted $1 million. The film said no, so strangely enough Chong came back asking for $500,000 or to work for free. Didn't really understand that part, but apparently the franchise was done with the games and decided to just cut him instead.
At number 5, Thora Birch. Thora Birch was once a rising star in Hollywood. From starring in Hocus Pocus to American Beauty, she was finding a lot of success in the industry, but due to a number of reported conflicts with a number of executives, Thora hasn't been finding the same level of success that she once was. Some say that she's even been blacklisted from Hollywood. Thora isn't solely to blame for her career troubles, as it is believed that much of this has to do with Thora's father and the conflicts that he's been involved in. The first big career-defining conflict came from back in 2010, when it was reported that Thora had been fired from an off-Broadway production of Dracula because her father would frequently accompany Thora to set and had physically threatened other actors. Thora was also fired from her project Manson Girls after her father allegedly got into an argument with production. Between 2010 and 2018, Thora reportedly only booked one gig, and the actress has said that much of that has to do with her bad reputation in the industry. She's also said that she's angered a lot of people over the years, so this could be one of the reasons she's been fired from Hollywood.
And at number 4, Maggie Rhee. Maggie starred on The Walking Dead right from the first season and was a staple in the show, but in season 9, she disappeared from the show, leaving many to wonder why. It was later reported that money was the reason. The show did not meet her monetary demands, so she was cut from season 9 and went on to play in ABC's action dramedy Whiskey Cavalier. But apparently her time with the show was already on the rocks, and she was bored of playing the same character for 8 years. Apparently she also wanted to explore comedy and more happy projects. In the end, since she had not been killed off the show, just written off, she did come back for the 11th and final season.
At number 3, we have iconic Disney star Hilary Duff, who was a staple for all early 2000s preteens with her crimped hair and then sweet style. The reason why Hilary and Paulo's Lizzie McGuire 2 manifestation didn't play out in real life was because of reported money disputes. Without Hilary, there would surely be no Lizzie, and apparently Hilary wanted more than what she was making then. According to Entertainment Weekly, the LM franchise closed off when Susan Duff, Hilary's then momager, refused Disney's deal for a sequel. Reportedly, Hilary was offered $500,000 in bonus for the second film if the first film surpassed $50 million. This was said to be a huge increase from the $100,000 bonus Disney originally offered the pair, along with part of a $4 million offer for its sequel, quote, against 4% of the studio's gross for the film. In full, Hilary's Lizzie payday exceeded this, but her mother expected the bonus to come immediately as opposed to waiting. In retaliation, Disney withdrew their deal completely while effectively axing the Lizzie McGuire franchise. In light of the incident, Susan said to Entertainment Weekly how Disney tried to, quote, bully them into what they wanted and was unsuccessful. So in turn, she and her daughter turned away from a sequel while the company ditched an entire series.
And finally, at number 1, Robert Duvall. Duvall first became critically acclaimed through his role as Tom Hagen in The Godfather. He even earned an Academy Award nomination for his work in the film and starred in the second movie as well. But he did not make it into part 3 of the film, apparently due to money. Speaking in 2004, Duvall explained that he not only left because he wanted more money than he was making, he was more so just disgusted at how much more some other actors were making. Saying, quote, "I said I would work easily if they paid Al Pacino twice what they paid me, that's fine. But not 3 or 4 times, which is what they did." In 2010, he explained he had no regrets about not appearing in the film because of the poor reviews that it got.
At number 8, Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons is certainly someone with little or no filter when it comes to his words and actions. He's an outlandish guy with a lot of energy, and so sometimes when he gets passionate or heated, then he can go off the rails a bit, and that can come back to bite him, as it resulted in him losing his job with Fox. At one point, the singer was a Fox favorite, making regular appearances on their programming where they would discuss hot topics in the world and would share their opinions on things. They seemed to really like him and enjoyed having him on their talk show, but after causing a stir at a meeting with Fox and making some crude comments towards some of the other staff members, Gene was banned for life and was fired from their show. Some of the things that Gene said to some women at the network got leaked, and it made the studio look bad, so they just had to let him go. In this day and age, making comments like that is sure to get you in some serious trouble, and for a celebrity, that can never be good because that can cost you your entire career, so Fox just had to save their own butts and had to get rid of the problem at hand. At number 7, Adrien Brody. Adrien Brody is a super successful actor, but after a scandal while hosting Saturday Night Live in 2003, his potential hosting career began and ended all in one night. When Adrien was hired to host SNL one evening, one of the tasks he was given that night was introducing the musical guest for the evening. Seems like a pretty simple enough task, but he still managed to mess it up. On the night that Adrien was hosting, the musical guest turned out to be Sean Paul, and Adrien saw this as the perfect opportunity to introduce Sean in an interesting way, to say the least. When it came down to announcing Sean's performance, Adrien came out dressed in fake dreadlocks and sporting a Jamaican accent. His bit was called out and was seen as offensive and uncalled for, as he went completely off script to do this bit, but no one found it funny in the slightest.
Man, Jamaica, man, you know, Rastafari, you got the whole family in the house, me got Sean Peter, you got Sean Paul, you got Sean Mary.
Because this was such an epic and controversial fail, the actor was subsequently fired and banned from coming back on the show. He faced a lot of backlash that hurt his image for a while, but clearly he's bounced back since then. At number 6, Jenny Slate. The first day at a new job is always a very stressful one. There's a lot of pressure to do well and start to fit into your new work environment, so usually employers forgive any kind of minor mistakes, but for comedian Jenny Slate, the mistake that she made on her first day was a bit of a doozy, and she ended up getting fired for it. Back in 2009, during her first performance as a cast member on the show, Jenny got the chance to perform one of the sketches that she wrote. She knew the bit like the back of her hand, or at least she thought she did, because when she went to go say one of her lines, she accidentally switched up one of the words and dropped an accidental F-bomb in its place. We all know that on network television, especially on talk shows like this, having adult language is a serious no-no, and when Jenny messed up, it just was not good for her at all. After that night, Jenny just struggled to fit the show's vibe, at least that's what she went on to say. The F-bomb, combined with her other behind-the-scenes stuff, caused her to get fired from one of the most famous shows on TV, and that definitely held her back in the comedy world for a little while, but clearly not forever. At number 5, Alec Baldwin. Back in 2013, Alec Baldwin became the host of a late-night talk show called Up Late with Alec Baldwin on MSNBC. But his career as a talk show host was very short-lived, as the show was promptly cancelled after just 5 episodes because Alex landed himself in a scandal that got him fired from the network. Alec had been exposed for getting into a heated brawl with paparazzi, where he went on a bit of a homophobic rant, which, as you can imagine, made Alec as well as the network look bad. Luckily for him, the only thing that really took a beating was his late-night career, since his acting career remained relatively steady after this scandal. He got lucky that he only got fired from one job and not all of them. At number 4, Leah Remini. Actress Leah Remini, known for her work on sitcoms like The King of Queens and Kevin Can Wait, was also a host on the talk show The Talk, but that career was pretty short-lived because she just didn't mesh well with her fellow co-hosts. In an interview with Howard Stern, Leah talked about how she was fired from the show because, quote, she refused to keep her mouth shut. Leah said that she was just doing what she thought was right for her on the show, but the producers thought differently, and this led to her losing her job. Her career still remained intact after being let go from the show though, so things certainly could have been worse for the actress. We just know that she might not be invited to be a talk show host again anytime soon. At number 3, Charles Rocket.
Between 1980 and 1981, SNL seemed to be on its way out, despite having been one of the biggest shows on TV. This all came after there were changes in staff, and this caused some drama because much of the cast weren't happy with the new changes being put in place. Because of this seemingly controversial change, much of the original cast of the show left, leading the new producer to have to rehire a brand new cast. This was great for new up-and-coming comedians because it gave new people new opportunities, but it also made others lose everything they worked for. Comedian Charles Rocket was one cast member who had their career destroyed on the show after he dropped an F-bomb during a skit. The comedian was closing out the show when he spoke some adult language, and since this is a huge no-no, he got reprimanded for it, and it caused him as well as a handful of others to get fired from the show. So he not only got himself fired, but many other cast and crew members as well, greatly affecting a lot of careers. At number 2, Ellen. Now I know you guys are gonna head into the comments right now and say, well, Ellen didn't get fired. And I know that. But she did kind of fire herself when she announced that she would be ending her show. She's laying herself off because she's taking away her own job. Last year in 2020, we watched the comedian and talk show host fall rapidly from grace as allegation after allegation came out, painting her as a nightmare to work with, among other things. She faced so much backlash for months for things like the treatment of her staff, her comments about lockdown, and the Black Lives Matter movement. Because of the events of last year, she lost a lot of credibility and respect in the industry, and her show lost a lot of ratings and advertisers as well, leading to her making the decision to end her talk show after so many years. So yeah, no one officially fired her, but she kind of just fired herself. And finally, at number 1, Sharon Osbourne. Talk show host Sharon Osbourne faced a lot of backlash a few months ago after making comments about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. Sharon and her former co-host Cheryl Underwood got into a heated argument surrounding Piers Morgan's remarks about Meghan Markle. During this feud, Sharon backed up some of Pierce's comments about Meghan's mental health, and this really frustrated a lot of people because many felt as though what was being said was going a little too far. As a result of the remarks that Sharon made, she was called a racist, and a number of other accusations came out about how she's used various slurs in the past when talking about her other co-hosts on the show. As a result of this, the network she worked for launched an internal investigation to look into the allegations against Sharon, and it all ended with Sharon being let go from the show.
And at number 8, Wendy Williams. Wendy Williams got fired from another gig before she got the coveted position of having her own show. She used to work for radio station Hot 97, where she had her own radio show, and she would talk about hot topics in Hollywood. But in usual Wendy fashion, she took it too far and paid the ultimate price. Wendy decided to post photos of Diddy on the beach when he was not wearing any clothes, if you catch my drift. And you could see everything in these photos. The station was obviously not happy with this, and she was suspended for the action, along with making a permanent enemy out of Diddy. After some time, the network decided to cut their losses and fire her. And after this, Wendy did not stay down for long, and she ended up landing her own daytime show on network TV. Talk about a comeback. Although due to health concerns, Wendy is no longer hosting the show, and it will be overtaken by the Sherry Shepherd show. And at number 7, Matt Lauer. In 2017, NBC was at the center of a huge scandal when they suspended broadcaster Matt Lauer only minutes before he was set to go live on air. Instead of the usual Lauer and Savannah Guthrie starring the broadcast, it was instead Guthrie and Hoda Khattab. The women started the broadcast with transparency, sharing an internal memo that had been sent out just minutes before announcing the suspension of Lauer. In this memo, it claims that multiple allegations had been made that Lauer engaged in inappropriate conduct with other NBC employees. These incidents started at the 2014 Sochi Olympics and apparently continued when the women returned back from the trip. In the statement, NBC chairman admitted that there was reason to believe these were not isolated incidents. Lauer issued his own statement days later, admitting to the acts. He was then fired by the network and has not worked since. And at number 6, Sharon Osbourne. Sharon Osbourne was fired from her hosting gig on The Talk after she got into a heated debate with fellow host Cheryl Underwood while speaking about her good friend Piers Morgan. Morgan got tons of backlash after making some nasty comments about Meghan Markle and her interview with Oprah. Then the women of The Talk discussed the incident, and Osbourne took her friend's side. After this, it was announced that Osbourne was let go from the show. CBS said in a statement that her behavior, quote, did not align with our values. When speaking about her firing with Bill Maher, she said, quote, I'm angry, I'm hurt, I've been called so many things in my life, but a racist is not one I will take. Osbourne continued, quote, she's entitled to her opinion, Piers is entitled to his, and that's what it's all about. Disagreeing with someone does not make you a racist in my book. A lot of Sharon's fans disagreed with her firing, and the ratings of the show plummeted after she left. Halfway number 5, Chris Cuomo. CNN's Chris Cuomo has officially been fired from his network after an investigation uncovered the anchor helped his brother, disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo, during his scandal. Andrew Cuomo's crimes include government corruption and sexual misconduct. Earlier, they announced he was going to be suspended, barring the results of the investigation, but partway through they uncovered evidence to fire him. CNN writes, quote, "While in the process of that review, additional information had come to light. Despite the termination, we will investigate as appropriate." This all came on the heels of an investigation by the New York Attorney General's office, which suggested that he was heavily involved in his brother's scandal. Following his termination, reports are coming out that Chris was accused of sexual harassment, and that's part of the reason for his termination. So it's clear no network will want to touch him now. And at number 4, Rush Limbaugh. The late Rush Limbaugh was a radio giant and had the biggest radio show in the country for many years. But before he became known for his own show, he was a football commentator for ESPN that ended up getting fired. During his stint as a football analyst on ESPN's Sunday NFL Countdown in 2003, he was commentating on quarterback Donovan McNabb, and said, quote, "The media has been very serious that a black quarterback do well. There is little hope invested in McNabb, and he has a lot of credit for the performances of his team that he didn't deserve. The defense carried this team." After the comments, he got tons of backlash considering they were clearly racially charged, and Limbaugh was only supposed to be speaking about the performance of these athletes. In the end, he decided to resign from the position, I'm sure after some long talks with the network. He said in a statement, quote, "The great people at ESPN did not want to deal with this kind of reaction." After leaving that gig, he started up his own radio show called The Rush Limbaugh Show, and it was a huge hit right up until he passed away. And at number 3, Mike Richards. After the passing of legendary Jeopardy host Alex Trebek, Mike Richards stepped in as one of the potential frontrunners to replace him as host. Richards had been an executive producer on the show for years prior and decided to put his hat in the ring to host when the position became available. However, that stint did not last, and shortly after Richards was announced as the new host, problematic behavior from his past started to resurface. These allegations were regarding Richards' behavior and comments towards women and minorities. Following the backlash, he was not only fired as host, but he was also fired from his executive producer position. The show released a statement saying, quote, "We had hoped that when Mike stepped down from the host position at Jeopardy, it would have minimized the disruption and internal difficulties we've all experienced these last few weeks. That clearly has not happened." And at number 2, Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon was fired from many of his shows and hosting gigs after he went on a strange anti-Semitic rant. In June of 2020, Nick Cannon was interviewing Professor Griff, who has a history of making anti-Semitic comments. During this interview, Cannon went on a bizarre rant calling Jewish and white people savages. At one point he said, quote, "The people that don't have melanin are a little less." Adding, quote, "They're acting as animals, so they're the ones that are actually closer to animals. They're the ones that are actually the true savages." After Cannon did not apologize for the comments, Viacom CBS cut ties with Cannon. He was fired from Wild 'N Out, an improv series that he had hosted and starred in for 15 seasons. Cannon has also hosted other shows for Viacom CBS-owned Nickelodeon channel over more than 20 years and was named chairman of spin-off Teen Nick in 2009. In a statement, the network said, quote, "Viacom CBS condemns bigotry of any kind. We categorically denounce any forms of anti-Semitism." And finally, number 1, Tom Bergeron. Tom Bergeron hosted the hit show Dancing with the Stars since it started in 2005. But that all changed in 2020 when he was abruptly fired. Since then, he has given more details, and it's clear that he and production butted heads. In one interview, he admitted that he saw it coming and was not shocked when he was fired. This is because he had spoken up against the things he disagreed with, to the dismay of the show. Bergeron said, quote, "The show had changed a lot for me starting in early 2008. The show I left was not the show that I loved. We had very clear, sometimes public differences of opinion about the new showrunner and some of the execs, and happily, I was at a point in my life and career where I didn't have to just shut up and take it." Although he never got into specifics, it was rumored that a huge point of contention between him and the show were the political stars that came on. He previously shared his disagreement with President Trump's former press secretary, Sean Spicer, coming on the show.
At number 10, Armie Hammer. Actor Armie Hammer caused the year's first big Hollywood scandal after making headlines as some intimate DMs were leaked on social media, which showed Armie talking about his bedroom fantasies. The page House of Effie exposed the leaked messages, exposing some of their adult content. Some of the things discussed in the messages were Armie's desire to eat people, and some people, like ex-partners, have come forward with their personal accounts of Armie's fantasies. But this isn't all that Armie is being scrutinized for. Armie has also been accused of assault. Because of this bombshell story, Army has been losing work from all sides. When the scandal first broke, he made the decision to back out of an upcoming film project alongside Jennifer Lopez, and he also dropped out of a series he was cast for Paramount Plus. On top of that, he's been fired from a number of other projects as a result of the allegations against him. Army has also been dropped by his agent and personal publicist. Hollywood has essentially fired the actor, as they will definitely not be casting Army in any upcoming projects anytime soon, and because he's pretty much lost all of his networking connections. At number 9, Chris D'Elia. 2020 saw the cancellation of a lot of people. A lot of celebrities ended up in some hot water, and comedian Chris D'Elia was one of the stars who hit rock bottom. Chris D'Elia faced multiple allegations of sexual misconduct and harassing underage girls online last year, and this has caused him to essentially be fired from Hollywood. After multiple women came forward to share their unpleasant experiences with the comedian, from unwanted advances to indecent exposure and manipulation, Chris has lost all support and credibility in the industry. Though this scandal started last year, now in 2020, Chris is facing more allegations, and a lawsuit was filed in early March accusing Chris of soliciting private content from a young woman under the age of 18. Though this happened in 2014 when she was 17, she said that she was inspired by the other women who've come forward to tell their story and seek justice. Chris's actions and experiences with these women have not only impacted their lives, but his as well, because as a result of his actions, Chris was dropped by his agency and manager. He will be hard-pressed to find any work in the industry now. Now, before I go any further, I'd like to ask you guys to consider leaving a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, because it really does help the channel out a lot. At number 8, Chadwick Boseman. The late Chadwick Boseman was an incredible actor. Each role he played was done amazingly, from playing King T'Challa in Black Panther to portraying Jackie Robinson in 42. Besides being a talented actor, he was also someone who fought for Black lives, and so when he saw something unjust or discriminatory, he was quick to call it out. This is a very good trait to have, but apparently it can get you fired. Chadwick once spoke out about how he was once fired from a soap opera for pointing out some discriminatory things in the show. While on All My Children, his first credited on-screen role, Chadwick played a character who was part of a gang. Chadwick explained that he asked, quote, why his character didn't have a father and why his mother was unable to care for her children. He told the show executives, quote, if we're out here assuming that Black characters on the show are criminals on drugs and have deadbeat parents, then that would probably be stereotypical. The executives didn't like that Chadwick questioned the character, and so he was fired from the show the next day. He was replaced on the show by Michael B. Jordan, both of whom went on to star in Black Panther together. Chadwick stood up for something and got fired for it, but it didn't matter because he went on to have an amazing career regardless.
And at number 7, Bruce Willis. The Expendables franchise is full of huge stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jason Statham, to name a few. Bruce Willis joined the cast in the 2010 movie, along with a 2012 sequel where he picked up a larger role. And even though he was set to star in the third film, it didn't happen, and Harrison Ford took the role instead. Later, it was reported that monetary disputes were the reason for the change. The Hollywood Reporter exposed, quote, Willis was offered $3 million for 4 days of consecutive work, and he allegedly demanded a pay bump to $4 million, $1 million per day, but the studio did not oblige, and Ford was cast within days.
At number 6, Terrence Howard. Nowadays, everyone knows actor Don Cheadle as the one who plays Colonel James Rhodes, aka War Machine, in the MCU, but that's not always how it was. In the first Iron Man film, the character was played by Terrence Howard, but after only one movie, Terrence was fired. Terrence was replaced, and in 2013, he explained what happened. During an interview, Terrence spoke out about how he had signed a 3-movie contract, but by the time it came around to filming the second movie, the studio proposed a much smaller paycheck, and when asked where his money went, he was told that the budget went to RDJ. He tried to negotiate a bigger salary, but talks didn't go well, and he was let go from the project. Terrence said, quote, it turns out that the person I helped become Iron Man, when it was time to re-up for the second one, he took the money that was supposed to go to me and pushed me out. His career in the MCU was certainly short-lived.
At number 5, we have Crispin Glover and why he never returned for the Back to the Future sequel. Crispin had switched out his story numerous times, but one standing point was the studio not meeting his pay demands. He explained in an AV Club interview how he was offered $150,000 to reprise his George McFly role, but this was far less than what co-stars Tom Wilson and Leah Thompson were working for. In the opinion of Crispin, the producers were trying to force him out and punished him with physically uncomfortable scenes for questioning the script. Crispin claimed he would have experienced whatever discomfort needed if he was being properly compensated. Therefore, when the actor tried his hand at negotiation, the higher-ups apparently lowered the amount even further, to an alleged $25,000 instead. Crispin chalked this up to them not wanting to work with him, yet The Hollywood Reporter featured a slightly different spin, where they spoke about Crispin not liking the ideal script, so he demanded $100 million to take the role back. According to Crispin, though, this alleged fabrication was merely a quote campaign smear tactic that he was supposedly asked to receive the same salary which Michael J. Fox was reigning in at the time.
At number 4, Chris Harrison. Bachelor Nation was hit with a pretty big scandal this year. Bachelor/Bachelorette host Chris Harrison faced backlash for comments that he made regarding another contestant's past. At the beginning of the Bachelor season early this year, photos of one of the Bachelor contestants was released which showed her attending an antebellum themed party. This was seen as racist and very offensive because of the history of the antebellum South. When this scandal first broke, Chris was asked about his thoughts on the matter, and he responded with some comments that fans perceived as perpetuating racism. In an interview on Extra, when asked about the contestant's controversial photos, Chris seemingly defended her actions of her being at this party because it was, quote, back in 2018. Rachel Lindsay, a past contestant and the show's first Black Bachelorette, questioned Chris on this, saying that it doesn't matter if it happened in 2018 or 2021, saying that it's never a good look. Chris continued to try and defend his stance, going back to the fact that this took place 3 years ago, but it still didn't win anyone over.
I don't disagree with you. You're 100% right in 2021. That was not the case in 2018.
Chris has since been fired from The Bachelor and will not be returning to host the next season of The Bachelorette. After apologizing for his remarks, Chris has said that he will make an effort to return down the line, but we don't know if he will be welcomed back on the show or if any network will hire him later on after this.
In at number 3, Suzanne Somers. Suzanne Somers starred in ABC's Three's Company, which was one of the most successful sitcoms ever. The show chronicled two women living with a man in a house in Santa Monica and followed their antics. After a few years, Somers decided to request a raise for this successful show, especially since learning her male counterpart on the show, John Ritter, was paid $150,000 per episode, while she was only making $30,000 per episode. Apparently, when she confronted the network about this, they offered her a $5,000 per episode raise, but that wasn't enough. So she didn't show up for the filming and was fired. She was then replaced on the show with a look-alike character. Apparently her firing was a part of a bigger picture, and there were other women who wanted more money from the network, so they decided to make an example out of Somers by cutting her.
At number 2, Robert Downey Jr. RDJ may have been responsible for someone getting fired from a movie role in the past, but he's also been fired by Hollywood in the past as well. Robert has had a rocky past. He started off his Hollywood career at a young age, but soon he was caught in scandal after scandal until he hit rock bottom. He didn't really get his comeback until he was cast in Iron Man. After his success in the MCU, you'd think that his days of being fired would be over, but think again. Robert was actually fired from the set of the movie Gravity after a last-minute decision was made to recast him. The 2013 film Gravity stars George Clooney as a leading male, but that role was first given to RDJ. After a few days of filming, the director decided that Robert just wasn't suited to play this role. He said, quote, "Robert is incredibly talented, but the technological aspects of the movie presented a big obstacle to his style of acting." Clooney soon replaced Robert, and the film went on to be a pretty big success, but one has to wonder what the movie would have been like had they not recast the role. And finally at number 1, Natalie Portman. Here's another last-minute casting change that would have altered the whole film. The 1996 film Romeo and Juliet stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes, but originally Natalie Portman was supposed to play the role of Juliet. Natalie was 13 years old at the time, and though it is canonically how old Juliet would have been in the original Shakespeare play, executives thought it would be a little too weird if the 13-year-old Natalie starred in the film alongside a 21-year-old Leo. Years later, in an interview, Natalie said, quote, "It was really disappointing, but I wouldn't have wanted to be in the movie and have it look wrong. It was a mutual decision, but in the end, Natalie was fired from the role. It would have been weird to see her in the role, but still, one has to wonder how the movie would have turned out had the change never happened."